In the early 2000s, one name dominated the world of mobile phones, a name synonymous with durability, innovation, and connecting people. That name was Nokia. Their iconic ringtone was the soundtrack of a generation. They held nearly half of the entire global market. They were not just a giant, they were invincible. But in just a few short years, this titan of industry would crumble into dust, its empire forgotten. How could a king lose his crown so completely? This isn't just a story about a failed company. It's a brutal case study in corporate arrogance, a fatal misunderstanding of the future, and a war they never saw coming. Today, we are decoding the downfall of Nokia and the billion-dollar mistakes that erased a legacy from the face of the earth. This is their brand Autopsy. The story begins at the absolute peak of their power, a time when Nokia could do no wrong, or so they thought. Throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, Nokia's dominance was absolute. Their phones were tough, their batteries lasted for days, and their software was famously user-friendly. They were masters of hardware, from the first internal antenna to customizable faceplates and the legendary game Snake. They dictated the trends everyone else followed. Their market share soared, crushing competitors like Motorola and Ericsson. In boardrooms across Finland, confidence wasn't just high, it was absolute. They believed they owned the customer. They thought the brand itself was their shield. That loyalty to Nokia was unbreakable, just like their phones. Inside the company, a dangerous culture was brewing. They saw themselves not as participants in the market, but as the creators and rulers of it. Their focus was entirely on incremental hardware improvements, a slightly better camera, a new color, a different shape. They were polishing the past, not building the future. But while Nokia was admiring its own reflection, a storm was gathering on the horizon. A new kind of device was emerging, focused on data, not just calls. Competitors in Asia were mastering supply chains, making cheaper phones. In Canada, a company called RIMs was capturing business users with its BlackBerry and its addictive keyboard. Nokia dismissed these threats. To them, BlackBerry was a niche business tool. The cheaper phones lacked Nokia's quality. They were gnats buzzing around a giant. This dismissal was their first critical error. They failed to see that the world wasn't just asking for a better phone. It was starting to ask for a different phone entirely. And then, in 2007, from Cupertino, California, the earthquake finally hit. A device that would change everything and seal Nokia's fate forever. Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, and in Helsinki, the executives at Nokia reportedly laughed. They were not prepared for the war that was about to begin. The iPhone wasn't a phone, it was a pocket computer. Its massive touchscreen and intuitive interface were revolutionary. But Nokia's engineers saw only flaws. It doesn't have a 3G connection, they said. The battery is terrible. No one will want a phone without a physical keyboard. They were technically right, but strategically blind. Nokia completely missed the point. The iPhone's killer feature wasn't its hardware. It was the software. It was the potential of the App Store. Apple created an ecosystem, a playground for developers to create applications that made the phone infinitely more useful and fun. It was a paradigm shift. Nokia's operating system, Symbian, was old, clunky, and incredibly difficult for developers to work with. It was a relic from a bygone era. The market shifted almost overnight. Consumers didn't want the most durable phone anymore. They wanted the smartest phone. Nokia was no longer selling what people wanted to buy. Then came the second punch, Google's Android, an open-source operating system that allowed manufacturers like Samsung, HTC, and LG to create their own iPhone killers. Nokia was now trapped, attacked from the high end by Apple and from the low end by a flood of affordable Android devices. Their kingdom was besieged. Panic began to set in. Instead of choosing a side, Adopting Android and fighting back, Nokia doubled down on its own failing technology, fueled by internal pride. They tried to create their own touchscreen phones, like the 5800 Express Music, but the user experience was terrible compared to the iPhone. It was too little, too late. Internal bureaucracy was crippling them. Brilliant engineers had designed touchscreen prototypes years before the iPhone, but management, obsessed with hardware profits, had killed the projects. This was the heart of their arrogance, the belief that their engineers could produce a miracle overnight if needed, ignoring the years they had already lost. Their market share began a freefall. Each quarterly report was a new disaster. The invincible giant was now bleeding, and the sharks were circling. Desperate for a lifeline, Nokia made one final fateful decision. They announced a partnership with a fallen giant of their own, Microsoft. In 2011, Nokia abandoned Symbian and announced it would exclusively use Windows Phone for its smartphones. The CEO called it jumping into a burning platform. The Lumia line of phones was born. The hardware was beautiful, a classic Nokia strength. The cameras were phenomenal. But the core problem remained: the operating system. Windows Phone had no ecosystem. It lacked the essential apps that users on iOS and Android took for granted. There was no Instagram, no YouTube, no Snapchat. They had built a beautiful car with a fantastic engine, but there were no roads for it to drive on. It was a ghost town of a platform. Marketing was also a disaster. They spent billions trying to convince the world to switch to a third ecosystem, a battle that was already lost. By tying their fate to Microsoft, Nokia had alienated their old Symbian user base and failed to attract new users from iOS or Android. They were in no man's land. The financial losses were staggering. Thousands of employees were laid off. Factories were closed. The company was being dismantled piece by piece. The arrogance was gone, replaced by desperation. The king was on its knees, its reign over. The only thing left was the final act of surrender. In 2013, in a move that shocked the world, Microsoft announced it would acquire Nokia's mobile phone business. The price was just over $7 billion. To put that in perspective, at its peak, Nokia was worth over $250 billion. They had sold their crown for pennies on the dollar. The once proudest brand in mobile technology, a symbol of Finnish national pride, was no more. The giant had been slain. So, what are the lessons from this catastrophic collapse? The autopsy of Nokia reveals 3 fatal mistakes. First, unchecked corporate arrogance. Nokia believed its brand was invincible. They underestimated new competitors and dismissed revolutionary ideas because they didn't invent them. Success had blinded them. Second, a failure to understand software. They were masters of hardware in a world that was rapidly shifting to be dominated by software and ecosystems. They sold products. Apple and Google sold platforms. By the time Nokia realized the difference, the war for developers, and therefore customers, was already over. And third, fear of cannibalization. Nokia was afraid to embrace radical new ideas, like their own early touchscreen concepts, for fear of hurting sales of their existing popular phones. They tried to protect their old empire instead of boldly building a new one. Their caution became their executioner. Giants that don't adapt, die. The story of Nokia is a chilling reminder to every industry leader. Your greatest strength can become your biggest weakness, and your past success guarantees nothing about your future. The brand name Nokia still exists today on phones made by another company, a licensed ghost of its former self, a whisper of what once was. It stands as a permanent lesson that in the brutal world of technology and business, you are either disrupting or you are waiting to be disrupted. There is no middle ground. What do you think was Nokia's single biggest mistake? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one of them. Thanks for watching our analysis on Decoding the Giants. If you found this case study valuable, be sure to hit the like button. and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the business wars that shaped our world. Don't miss our next investigation. Next, why not check out our video on the colossal failure of Blockbuster and how they handed Netflix a billion-dollar empire on a silver platter. Or explore our deep dive into Kodak's tragic story of inventing the digital camera and then failing to embrace their own creation. Until next time, stay curious and keep decoding.